horrible moment of realization.
What is that?
That the literally random t-shirt I pulled out of my drawer this morning to wear today.
Protect trans kids.
Is basically wearing the band's t-shirt to the concert. And I absolutely did not mean to do that. It is just a happy coincidence that also, honestly, just feels a little embarrassing to me.
That's awesome. Yeah, I happen to be transgender. I like to say being trans is like the 6th most interesting thing about me.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm gonna repeat to you at the beginning what I say at the end of every interview with anybody like Michelle Paradise or anybody who has any, like Michael McMahon. I say, how about just one recurring trans feminine character? Just one.
Just one. Yeah, 100%. I can do absolutely nothing about that. But,
I know.
But I can very much support you. And when it finally comes time where there are people who are capable, who have the authority to make those decisions, I know that I am just one of an enormous number of people who are like, cool, just tell us where to go. We're ready.
That's right. Now I know it's going to happen someday. I'll make it my little shtick that I do. And I'm sure everyone's tired of hearing me say it, but I must tell you, full disclosure, you and I do have one thing in common besides our love for Star Trek. We were both child actors, except one of us is more famous than the other.
Oh, is it you?
No. The closest I came was, this is going way back, a film called Taps with Timothy Hutton and George C. Scott, Sean Penn. You auditioned. So did I. I auditioned for the part of Sean. And it came down to myself and this kid from Glenridge, New Jersey, who was really good at being aggressive. And I'm a trans girl pretending to be a boy. And you know what? They picked this kid from Jersey. You may have heard of him, Tom Cruise.
Yeah. I'm curious. And if this is an inappropriate boundary blowing by question, please feel free.
Go ahead.
But I'm so curious. You knew who you were when
from age
you
4.
went to that audition. Yeah, you knew. You knew who you were. The energy of Taps, as I recall it, is extraordinarily masculine and like toxic in a way. Was it just the worst thing in the world to kind of be in there? Was that hard?
I did what my mother asked me to do. My mother would say jump, and I didn't even ask how high, because I was supporting our family. My dad was a police officer, my mom was a homemaker, and my job from the age of 4 was to do modeling, do radio commercials and acting commercials, and if I could, to get like a movie part. So I tried for that. I tried for a couple other things. Yeah.
Our lives were so similar in that regard. Mine started when I was like 7.
Yeah. And you just did it, right? You did it because that's what you were supposed to do.
I wanted my parents to love me.
Exactly.
I wanted them to approve of me.
Yeah. And that's the other thing. Going on auditions and asking people to like you. And if they didn't like you, you felt this rejection of, I guess I'm not good enough. Talk about years of therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was hard. I will tell you one thing that I've talked about this with other people. When I was 12, my mom stopped pretending she wasn't hearing me when I was talking about being a girl. And she put me up for a radio commercial as a girl, and I got it. So she thought maybe we could do more with this. And I started modeling as a girl for 5 years until my dad found out. And then he hit the roof, and that was the end of that.
Oh, I'm so sorry. That must have been, I cannot even imagine.
It was great because I wanted to. I wanted to do this. I wanted to be.
But just the way, everything that comes around it, and
yeah, sure.
There are a lot of times where I feel like adult me wants to be the loving parent that little me didn't have. I want to be the loving parent that little you didn't get to have. And there's just, I feel this visceral need to reach through time and hug you at 12 years old and just tell you, like, girl, I see you. It's okay. It's gonna be all right. I totally see who you are. Nobody ever did that for me until I was on Star Trek. And then my Star Trek family was like, we get you. You're weird. That's cool. It's okay.
Yeah. And then, I will say, I don't ask you to believe in it, but I was so convinced that I could talk my way out of being trans, that I could convince and fool, everyone that I was not trans. And
Yeah.
it was my wife who actually finally asked me to stop pretending. But I went to get my own version of conversion therapy. I went to get hypnotherapy.
Oh,
So hypnotherapy was a big failure, but it did allow me. I did sort of like a time travel thing where I went and visited myself as a young person and did exactly what you're talking about. It was the
yeah.
most weirdest thing. It's almost like Star Trek in terms of Guardian Forever, whatever. I got to talk to myself at a very precious age about it's going to be okay.
I
And
that kind of emotional time with a younger version of me through my writing.
yeah,
I've been allowing different versions of myself to express themselves in ways they were not allowed to when I was younger. So I spent all this time working on my upcoming book, Still Just a Geek, and I spent all this time with teenage me and with early 20s me, and lately the like really little version of me, the like 10 years and younger than me, has been like, I have some things to say.
I know.
But that I haven't done it yet. I have friends who have done the EMDR therapy, and they have all told me that it allows them to revisit objectively without emotionally re-experiencing traumatizing moments in their past, where they're able to actually do that thing. And I've done it too, where it's like,
incredible.
Young me, the people who are supposed to be there for you are not. So I'm going to be here for you now in this weird way that time is a flat circle. And I'm just going to try to comfort you as a way of healing myself. I think of it as like carrying this bag of pain around. And every now and then I've got to reach into it and like kind of dump it out and like organize it and sort through it and then put it away so that like it's no longer being carried around by the younger version of myself. Right. I'm just like, you know what? I'm almost 50. I can do this for you now.
Wow. So you're 49 now?
Yeah, I'll turn 50 in July.
I'm 57, so we're not that far apart. But in high school, I was I was taught about this bag you're talking about. They called it the gunny sack. The only difference between my gunny sack and the bag you're carrying is they told us that if you don't do what you do, which is empty it every once in a while, it gets so heavy that you use it as a weapon against anyone who just causes a minor offense. They might have like taken your parking space or they stepped on your foot, and you just take the entire gunny sack and you hit them with it, and they have no idea why you're unloading on them. So it was sort of like a prelude to what you're just talking about. I think you've done some incredible work on yourself, Will, that I don't know where that comes from. I don't know how you found that. A lot of people end up, in the gutter or losing everything. Not on a show on Paramount Plus, that's for sure.
Honestly, I think that I can kind of pick out two real meaningful moments. And one was the day that I stood in my kitchen and I told my wife, I remember it, I was like, I feel like maybe it's not going to happen right now, but at some point in the very near future, I'm going to need to have a real hard cry. I'm going to need to have one of those from like the bottom of my soul cries, because
and we call it ugly cry, but I hear you.
Ugly crying. It's even more than ugly crying. Like ugly crying is where you eventually settle down to from where this starts. And I told Anne, I'm real confident my dad doesn't love me. And I'm pretty sure he never did. And she was like, anything you need to get through that, and she just held me. And then I started crying, and I just cried for a really long time. And that began this process where I started to realize that if the things my dad said about me, and I rarely call him my dad, I generally call him the man who was my father, because he wasn't a dad to me at all. If the things he said about me were true, she wouldn't love me, because that person he says I am is terrible. But I'm not that person. And if that were true, I wouldn't have my incredible wife. I wouldn't have my amazing kids. I wouldn't have all these unbelievable friends. I think that probably he's wrong about me. And that the things he says are kind of projections of his own sense of failure and his own insecurities. And that started me down this thing of like, And it also happened with getting sober, like quitting drinking, because I drank so much that I was just like, when the pain was too much, I would just get drunk so I couldn't feel it anymore. And then it's been a little over 6 years since I quit drinking. And that just kind of gave me this clarity, right? I was just like, I gotta face this stuff. I don't want to live my life in pain anymore. And there was just this time where I don't know how it happened. I know that my wife was a really, really big part of it, but there was this moment where I just felt like it's not worth suffering anymore. He's never going to love me. My mother made me her thing when I was a kid, and she used her thing to fill up the emptiness in her life that she didn't get from anywhere else.
Especially him.
And then they had my brother and my sister, and my brother and my sister are their family. And I love my sister. We're really, really, really close.
Oh, good.
My brother and I have no relationship. My father kind of turned my brother against me when we were really young. My dad, I think, was just really jealous of me and really resented that I was working and supporting the family in ways that he couldn't.
Right.
And for like so many times when we were little, I would walk into the room and my dad would be talking shit about me with my brother. When I was like 13, 14, and my brother is 4 years younger than me. Like, okay, who does that? I mean, come on, man. Who even does that? So
with a 9-year-old, shit talking the 13-year-old, the older brother.
So I don't hold it against my brother that he developed this impression of me that is the way our father views me.
Right. Well, he wrote a script. I used to say that my mother knew how to push my buttons because she installed them. And it sounds to me like that's what your father did to your brother.
Yeah. And it was really rough. And it was like when I would speak up for myself, they all ganged up on me, told me that I was wrong. Now they were the victims. I was the aggressor. I ended up apologizing to him after he had done some shitty thing to me, because that's what mom made me do. And I am real close to my sister. We're really close. I adore her. I love her. She is my family. But I spent my entire childhood feeling like my mother and father put me on the outside of their family. They kept me around as a thing that was useful.
Right.
And I think that my mother believes that she loves me, but she can't see past her narcissism and her neediness to understand how that like kind of wasn't fulfilling for me, right? It was more of a one-way thing. I mean, I guess this is as good a time as any to like kind of tie it all together. The reason that I wrote the things that you wanted to talk to me about.
Well, I definitely want to talk about those things, but I'm glad you gave us the bed here.
Yeah, it's very much the way that I grew up, feeling like nobody ever had my back.
Right.
Feeling like nobody stood up for me. And I do my best to be the person I need in the world. And I need somebody to stand up for me. I need somebody to stand up for people who are, for whatever reason, unable to stand up for themselves. And I feel like you're either with the oppressed or the oppressor. There is no middle ground. There's only middle ground if you're an absolute coward and you're just a fucking Vichy, privileged person who doesn't want to be bothered by somebody else's struggle because it's inconvenient to you.
How do you, as a father and a son, stop yourself from repeating the sins of your father, of visiting upon your children? I don't know how old they are, but what happened to you? How does that accomplish? Because I know my father's most famous quote to me was always, "I try to be a better father to you than mine was to me, and I hope you'll be better than I am to you." And I'm excelling at that.
Yeah. So my dad never cared and never had any kind of conversations about that at all with me. Never talked to me about parenting. Never talked to me about like, I don't like this terminology. It's dated gendered terminology, but I think you'll know what I mean when I say it. When a boomer dad says to his son, "Be a man," like that carries a weight with it, and it carries an expectation with it. I never even got that, right? Like He just did not care. He rejected me. The only time he ever paid attention to me at all was to humiliate me, to hurt me, to put me down, to build himself up, things like that. I know
You were a
how
tool.
much,
Yeah, you were a
yeah,
tool.
and I knew how much that hurt all the time. And I love my children. I have loved my children from the day I met them. I mean, they were my stepchildren before they were my adopted children. And before they were my adopted children, they were my children in every way that matters. They just didn't have the same name as me, and they didn't have the same biology, the same DNA as me. I did not want my kids to experience any of the things I experienced. I wanted them to grow up knowing that I loved and supported them. I absolutely wanted them to do well, and I wanted them to like make their mark on the world, and I wanted them to use the hey, get out of there. Sorry, my dog's trying to get out.
I see. What's your dog's name?
Marlo. I wanted them to not waste their privilege and to really do good things with the privilege that they have. And I thought the best way to do that was by example. And I guess at some point it was just kind of like, well, what did my parents do? I'll do the opposite. I'll do a different thing. And a ton of credit goes to my wife and their mom. She's amazing. She's wise and she's kind and she's selfless and she's loving and she's gentle and she's honest and just, she made me, I wanted to deserve her. I wanted to bring to her and them what they brought to me. So I worked really, really, really hard to unlearn the toxic, hurtful behaviors that had been modeled to me. And we did a lot of family therapy when we were younger. I did a lot of individual therapy when I was younger. Like I told my kids when they were little, everything worth doing in this life is hard.
Yes.
Everything that matters is hard. And that can vary from day to day. Sometimes just getting out of bed is hard.
Yeah.
And you did it. Good for you. That was hard. So you did it. That was a thing worth doing, right? So yeah. I would always tell them, like, if it was an easy thing to do, everybody would do it. And when it's hard, a lot of people give up and don't push through it to the end. So if you can get to the end of a thing that's hard, you've shown yourself something. You've learned a thing about yourself. Like, what else can you do that you think you can't do? And I just I worked so hard to instill those values in them. Like Nolan's still figuring it all out. Ryan's in grad school and working really, really hard. They're both millennials dealing with the awful fucking world that the consequences of Reagan's deregulation and anti-unionism and all of that, like all of the consequences of all of that, like my kids live in the middle of all that stuff.
Yep. I have a 23-year-old who's a senior in college and also starting grad school. I have a 19-year-old at the same college who's a sophomore. Yeah. And I have a 15-year-old who is a sophomore in high school. I was telling Jennifer, today is the 6th anniversary of me becoming a widow. So it's a hard day for us, but at the same time, thank you, cancer sucks. But at the same time, you know what? I was living this other life in LA. I was working at The Advocate. I was a news editor. I had been exiled from my home. I was going to be one of those dads who you see on FaceTime and visits once in a while. And she got cancer and then she died. And I moved back home. And we've been together ever since. All 3 of my kids have come out as LGBT. And we're still in the same house. 18 years we've been here. And, we're resilient. And I'm so proud of them. And it's the kind of thing where I gave her a lot of credit for the great job she did as a mom, but it's been my job for the last 6 years. So I take a lot of that credit too.
You're like a single mom now. That's fucking hard. You're single mom, 2 kids in high school.
It's funny because a lot of dads are single dads, and that's a different job because society doesn't look at women who raise their kids alone the same way it looks at dads who raise their kids. So
Yeah,
yeah, it was.
like, wow, you're a single dad. That's super duper hard. Like, oh, well, you're a single mom. I mean, that's what you're supposed to do. Wait, excuse me, what?
Yeah, I know. It's
What?
really uncanny. And I was not prepared for
Fucking
this.
hard, man.
This was never part of the plan. Although when I was 5, I will say that when my sister was born, I told my mommy that I also wanted to have kids. I want to have 5 kids. And she says, you can't have kids. And I thought, what's wrong with me? I didn't realize that she meant boys don't have babies.
Oh my God.
So enough about me. Let me tell you why I decided I wanted to talk to Wil Wheaton. And it's not the Dave Chappelle article, although we are going to talk about that. It was how you, as someone who is not a classically trained interviewer, as far as I know, you didn't go to journalism school. It's how you specifically handled the Blue and Ian interview and all the interviews I've watched from the beginning of your Ready Room experience. You are, and even here, you're asking me questions that a lot of people have never been smart enough to ask. Where does this come from that you are so inquisitive, so curious, and so able to get these questions answered? Because that's a really hard job. Speaking as someone who does it professionally, I get paid to do it.
Yeah. It's going to take me a minute to get to the answer. Let's meander there together, and we'll see.
That's okay. I've got plenty of guess.
Okay. I have, but this works on a few different levels. One level is that I just have this real special love and affection and appreciation and respect for Blue and Ian because they're young people on Star Trek. I know what it means to be a young person on Star Trek.
You said so as much. You actually took time out of the show to say, before we get to the interview, I have to say something. Just, oh, I'm crying watching this.
They don't know what it means right now. And that's part of the beauty of being their age. It's wonderful. Like, they have no idea. And when I'm a really old man, right, and they're like wheeling me onto stage at some convention somewhere, and they're like, you know, still sexy as hell and great and awesome and all that, they're going to be like, hey, we get it now. I didn't get it when I was 18, but I get it now. I understand. So, like, there's that layer, right? And that thing where when I was their age, nobody that I can remember made an effort to meet me where I was.
You were expected to be an adult. You were expected to act older than you are. And you're still a teenager.
And there was also this implication, and I think that a lot of this was created by my manipulative mother, who was overly concerned with appearances and what will the neighbors think and that sort of thing. Where I knew as a kid, there were like right answers and wrong answers. There was a particular way to present myself, which would please everyone. And there was a way that was the real me, which I had to keep secret to myself. Gosh, Dawn, I wonder if you know what I'm talking about.
It's a little.
I wonder if that is in any way relatable. So I just wanted to meet them where they were. I wanted to respect them as people. I wanted to just, I don't know, treat them like people.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I grew up with this expectation starting at 7 years old that I was going to be a responsible adult. I remember doing a TV pilot when I was like 10 or 11, and one day I just had a meltdown. I didn't want to be there. I was a kid. I wanted to be home. I didn't like the scenes we were doing. I didn't want to be going to studio school. And it was just all too much. And I just had a fucking meltdown. And I was and my mom wasn't even with me on set that day. One of my many guardians was. That was always weird to me. My mom made a big deal about how this was a thing we were doing together. But then when it came time to be on the set, she couldn't be there with me. It was always somebody else had. She was there for the premieres and the press and all that stuff, but she just didn't have time to take me to the set. So by the time we got home, my guardian kind of like narked on me to my mom, called my house and complained about me. No one made an effort to talk to me and say like, hey, buddy, what's going on? Is everything okay? Nobody tried to do that. Mom was mortified, embarrassed. made me hand write a letter to the entire crew, which was posted on the production office door, apologizing for how immature I was. I was 10. I had all that on me, and at the same time, I was treated like a child who wasn't allowed to have thoughts or opinions or wishes or anything like that. So I really felt like just this thing that was moved around and was kind of like just at the disposal of adults when I was useful to them. Like all of that changed when I was cast on Star Trek, because the Star Trek cast saw me as a person, treated me as a person, and they became my family. But the family that raised me just never gave me any of that at all. So when I talked to them, these young kids, I cannot comprehend an LGBT experience because I'm a cishet white guy. I live life on the absolute lowest difficulty setting with the celebrity cheats enabled. I cannot possibly understand any of that, but I think I can relate in my way to feeling a little out of place in the world and a little unsupported in the world. And I just wanted to meet them where they were and let them tell their stories and let them be the focus and support whatever they wanted to talk about. And I had discussed with with Max, producer Max, who's the primary writer of all of my questions. Yeah, Max Nicholson. Max I miss him. I'm incredibly happy for Max. He got an incredible job opportunity. He and his partner have moved away. They have a new place. He advanced his career in an unbelievable way. I'm so happy and proud and excited for him. And I miss him. It's definitely Ready Room's loss. Nick Golding, who's stepping into his shoes, is amazing, and I love him, and I'm thrilled that Nick is there. He's doing a great job, but I'm always going to miss Max, and I think everybody on our team would agree with all of that. And it's not taking anything away from Nick. I think Nick would say exactly the same thing. So anyway,
it's hard stepping into that, but you were saying, go ahead. Sorry.
We were talking about pulling all those questions together. I said, being trans is part of their experience, and I want them to be able to speak about that, and I want to give them a platform to talk about that, and I also want to just talk about what it means to see yourself in media. I can look everywhere and see myself. There's fucking white dudes with beards everywhere. We're so goddamn boring, and we just take it for granted. I cannot think of a ton of shows where there are openly trans people just hey, what's up? We're people and we're existing. And the fact that we're trans is, as you said, the 6th least interesting thing about us. I mean, it's just and I wanted them to be able to talk about that. And I wanted to just sort of open up those doors for them and support them. At the same time, I didn't want to put onto their shoulders, hey, you kids who are under 25, carry the weight of being representatives for your entire community. I didn't want to do that at all. So some of the questions I asked them about, I'm sure you are aware of, and I'm sure that you love the little miniature family of the 4 of them that exist. And I had
Anthony Wilson, yeah, sure.
God, so Wilson's one of my favorite people in the world.
Same.
I hardly know him at all, but I have rarely been in the presence of a person who just radiates love the way Wilson radiates love. It just touches you and you're like, fuck, I feel incredibly loved right now, and nobody's even doing it. And I said, I asked Ian and Blue about this. Would you talk about their family? And Wilson said there is this tradition in the queer community of elder queers mentoring and loving and caring for younger queers.
Babies, yeah.
In that moment, please honestly tell me if this is offensive and if this is appropriative, because I don't mean it to be at all.
Go ahead.
In that moment, I was like, this is why I've always been comfortable around gay men. This is why I have always felt safe around gay men. There's
nothing wrong with that.
There is, in my experience, there's predatory people everywhere, okay? All over the place, regardless of what their sexuality is. In my experience, the elder gay men in my life were kind and loving and caring. And in the years since we've grown up and I have talked to them, they were the ones who saw how hurt I was. They are the ones who saw through the facade I built so diligently to protect my parents and protect myself. And
it's relatable. It's very relatable. Absolutely.
And I wanted Wilson to talk about that, and he did. I think that interview's aired. I can't remember if it's aired or not. I asked Anthony the same questions, and Anthony spoke to it and talked about it as well. Anthony talked about coming out in the program for Ren.
Yeah.
Thank you, boyfriend.
Yeah.
Like,
I am blessed to have met both of them in person. Wilson on the red carpet in 2015, and I was my first ever red carpet as myself. He was so welcoming and accepting and understanding of me being nervous, and we made friends at that point. And then Anthony at the red carpet in New York when Discovery was announced at the Paley Center, 2017. And I've met Anthony a couple times since then, and we've talked on Zoom, of course. Yeah. And just real, sincere, straightforward, no bullshit kind of guys, you know, who they lead with their hearts, they lead with love. And what I'm going back to is the question, which is, I'm sure Max did a great job helping you write questions, but you really do something that most cisgender interviewers never are able to do, which is you reach a level of questioning, of interrogatories that I talk about this when I interview someone who's LGBT all the time. When cisgender people interview us, it's always about, oh, you lost this, or, you know, you hurt this, or you're hiding or pretending.
Yeah.
And instead, you're finding the heart and the joy and the love that is what being LGBT is really all about. Loving yourself so much that you stop hurting yourself by not being who you really are.
I guess maybe part of that is in my way, which is, you know, still, which as shitty as it is probably 1,000 times easier than being trans or being gay, certainly in America in the last 30 years.
I won't argue with you.
I remember that we talked about this, and I feel like I talked about this with Anthony.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in this world where every time an LGBT story was told, it was generally told by a cisgender person.
Right,
and
right.
It was all about the struggle. It was Philadelphia. And like, I don't know, I feel like, yeah, that's a really legitimate part of the story of the queer experience. Like, absolutely. At the same time, like, what about my friend who's gay, who is the most amazing painter, who paints fucking miniature figures, and it's unbelievable and it's magnificent, and why don't I just talk to him about like being a painter and it doesn't matter that he's gay? Like,
right.
Why does it have to be the thing? Nobody comes to me and is like, you know what I want to talk to you about is why you can't grow a beard. Like, you know, or like, you know what I want to talk to you about is the color of your eye. Let's talk about that. You know, like, oh, I know you wear glasses. I bet that was a struggle. I didn't want it to be about that. I just wanted it to be about like, hey, you're people, and these are the things that we have in common. And I don't know, maybe somebody who out there is just like, oh shit.
All right, I just wanted to thank you. That's the main reason I wanted to do this interview.
Listen, I really appreciate that. I had a responsibility and I had an opportunity and I didn't want to waste it.
It did great. I hope it did well for the Paramount Plus folks, because it was great. How long do you think you'll be doing this? Are you going to keep on doing Ready Room?
I will do Ready Room as long as they will let me. It's my favorite job I've ever had. I love it. Are you kidding me? So like being an audiobook narrator is great. I get to read and get paid for it. I get to perform and get paid for it. That's great. I love it. And I don't even have to deal with anybody else. I get to be by myself with the director. Like, it's amazing. Ready Room, though, is this amazing collaborative effort. Just this magnificent crew, a fantastic cinematographer, fantastic control room, just the support we get from consumer products and from Paramount in general. the actors on all of these shows, they don't have to come do this. They choose to come do this. I want to honor that. It is very important to me to honor and respect that and appreciate it. So like when they say, hey, we're going to do Ready Room for this, like, awesome. Please let me do more, you know, like, let's just keep on doing it. I just saw that you know, they dropped a premiere date for Strange New Worlds.
Timing couldn't be better with you. There's so much Star Trek now.
I know, it's amazing. So like, they haven't asked yet, but hopefully, just because I'm so excited for that. The fans of Prodigy are like, why aren't you doing them for every Prodigy? So like, I don't know if that's gonna happen. I mean, I feel like Kate's really got that covered with those amazing 1 minute
videos, the vignettes. Yeah, those are great.
My nephew is 9 and he is obsessed with Prodigy, and he is really into voice work. And my sister told me that the thing he loves the most when he watches cartoons is getting to meet the people behind the voices. He loves watching videos of the voice actors. And I really want to do Ready Rooms for Prodigy, specifically so that my 9-year-old nephew will think I'm cool, that I got to meet and interview the people who make the voices for these characters that he is absolutely crazy about.
Listen, if that's what it takes, that you have to use a 9-year-old to be able to get a gig, all right, go for it. But I know.
I mean, like, it's just anything I can do to like trick my brain into thinking I'm cool for a little bit. Like, let's go for it, man. I'm all over it.
Yeah, I have 3 kids who remind me I'm not cool all the time. And if that isn't enough, I have college students who remind me I'm not cool.
I know.
So I'm gonna ask you 2. I want to give you a heads up about 2 big questions I want to talk about. I want to talk about Dave Chappelle and why you wrote that letter, the post. And then before we go, I went on Facebook Star Trek, the unofficial Facebook group for Discovery.
Yeah.
And I let people know that I was talking to you and they have questions for you.
Oh, I love that. Okay.
Okay. So
cool.
Let's do Chappelle and get it out of the way, because I hate having to even talk about him. But hey, you brought it up. You wrote about him.
Yeah.
What prompted you to do that? What was it, the Ian and Blue thing, or was it something else that made you say, I've got to speak out on this subject? Because you're not a stand-up comic.
I'm not. I have a ton of friends who are comedians.
Same.
I'm not exceptionally close to most of them. I'm very close to a couple. It's a consequence of being a sketch comedy writer and performer in Hollywood in the early 2000s. I am in the same kind of group. There were like, imagine that we're like in the same school. There's one side of the school is all the sketch performers. One side of the school is all the stand-up comedians. I'm in the same school as like the Mr. Show guys and Brian Posehn and Sarah Silverman and Patton Oswalt and then a ton of incredibly talented sketch performers. I'm going to name check Annie Sertich because she deserves all the attention in the world. She should be a Saturday Night Live cast member. I do not know why they did not cast her. So I got to work with these sketch performers who you'll never know because they all went on to be writers for like really ridiculous sitcoms and animation and things like that. So I know a lot of them. As I said in the essay that I wrote, I'm so ashamed of myself and so regretful of how homophobic I was as a child, especially knowing how safe and comfortable I ultimately would feel around older gay men. And that, as I wrote, was largely a consequence of growing up in a society where that kind of homophobic behavior was tolerated. It was super tolerated. It was super okay. And if anyone was like, hey, this is hurtful, the standard response was, that's just jokes. Stop being so sensitive. What I realized as I grew older and confronted my own homophobia was that it had been really normalized for me, really strongly normalized. And I am appalled when I look back and recall some of the things I said and did as a younger person. I forgive myself for not knowing any better, but I'm still grossed out and bothered by it a lot. So Chappelle does all of his things. He is, in my opinion, at this moment, as close as you're going to get to the face of anti-trans, anything. That's even for people. I mean, there are plenty of people in politics, pick a random Republican. But like, for even people who are not in politics, like Chappelle's funny as fuck. He's a great writer. His older stuff is unbelievably hilarious.
He was great in the movie. He was great in Star is Born. I thought he was great.
He, for me, a long time ago, was heading down that path as George Carlin and Richard Pryor and Bill Hicks. And like that kind of like, oh, you're more of a social critic than you are a comic. Oh, I get it. And then all of a sudden he was like, hey, everybody, guess what? I'm a giant fucking bigot who believes all these people are a joke. All these people, and I don't have to tell you the statistics for suicide and rape and abuse and trauma. You know them. And he was like, and I guess because I'm Black, it's cool for me to do that. And I was like, no, it's not. That's not okay. The solution to a rapist being held accountable for their behavior is not for them to be raped in prison. That's a victory for rape. We want to end all of it. Like you're totally missing the point. The point is to end bigotry, to stop normalizing hatred of a group of people who do not choose to be that thing, right? Like whatever, like you don't choose to be who you are. You're not a fucking joke. You're a person. And
but to him, it is a choice. It's dressing up. It's
it's just fucking wrong.
Yeah. He doesn't get it. He just doesn't get it, I think.
One of those things where it's like a person standing outside, pointing at the sky and screaming at you that it is not blue. Like, I'm sorry, dude. I know you don't like it, but it is. And here's the thing: when I wrote that, he was added to be the headliner of Netflix's giant comedy thing. It's real clear. Netflix as a corporation has made a choice. And that choice is, we are super cool with all of this. We're not going to put a content warning on the special. We're not going to pull it down. We're going to totally rally behind them. And here's the thing that really upset me and really hurt me and really infuriated me. And I think really pushed me to just say, you know what? Fuck all of you. I'm going to speak up and I don't give a shit what happens to me. Every comedian I know, with like 3 exceptions, was like, yeah, well, we got to really fucking just, link arms and protect Chappelle. Because some reason.
Jon Stewart, who I worship. And I was like, man,
And so to me, to put this in language that even stupid people can understand, that is no different than linking arms with a segregationist in 1961 and saying, but, they're separate, but they're equal. There is no fucking difference. It is disgusting. It is indefensible. Shame on every single one of those fucking cowards who is so worried and preoccupied and obsessed with their own access, their own influence, their own social standing, their own ambition, that they are willing to put all of that ahead of the fundamental right of a trans person to exist and walk down the street feeling as safe as I do. That is inexcusable. That is indefensible. It enrages me.
It was clear.
And until all of us who are not affected by this, doesn't affect me. Like, I could be the gayest gay guy in the universe, and look at how much I pass. Look at me. Nobody looks at me a second time. I can do anything I want. Look, let's have gum and nuts in one thing. I'm a dude. I said we should have that. That makes sense. Let's eat it. Like, I mean, it's just like, I am fucking drowning in privilege.
Yeah, well.
And I know I'm not the only one. That's the thing. I'm not the only one. I have nothing to lose.
Well, wait a minute. You have a career and you have a name. Did you think for a moment that this could end up, I mean, what if it cost you the Ready Room?
I'm absolutely willing to do that. Are you kidding me?
No, I'm not. I'm just,
So
hey,
like,
it's Hollywood, you know, I mean.
Can you imagine a person who during the civil rights movement had an opportunity? I think of Betty White, and I'm not comparing myself to her at all. Okay,
I get it.
I get it. I'm just saying, like, she put a black man on her show, and they were like, we're going to cancel your show. And she went, fuck you, cancel it. And they did. And she went on to have a great life, and the world changed, and those people are wrong.
That's right.
I'm going to be on the right side of history. I am not going to be an impediment to progress. I'm not going to waste the little bits of privilege that I have if I can help just fucking make the world safer for Blue and Ian, who I adore.
Right.
To make the world safer for you.
And by extension for me and everyone else. I had an argument with a gay person in TV who isn't in a comedy, but he tried to convince me, well, it's just you don't appreciate the art form. And I'm like, no, I appreciate that you think of it as art, but it's no more art than a sign that says, colored fountain only, you know?
There's this thing where like we see colored fountain only in a museum and we're like, Jesus Christ. You see it in somebody's house, and you're like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Right? Like, things belong in certain places, and we have to acknowledge these places where we've really fucked up. Netflix fucked up. Dave Chappelle fucked up. Every single one of these comedians that put their arms around him and protected him fucked up. They're all wrong. They're all on the wrong side of history. People are going to suffer. People are going to struggle longer than they need to, longer than they should have. And somebody on my Facebook said to me, this thing you wrote has real big, nobody had my back, and so therefore I have yours energy. And that actually made me feel really good and really validated. Ultimately, very selfishly, the struggle for trans acceptance is not going to directly affect my life in any way at all. But that doesn't mean that I don't care. And I'm disgusted by people who aren't affected by it, so therefore they just don't care. It just doesn't matter.
Thank you, Will. I really appreciate you expounding upon that, and I'm going to quote your op-ed at length. I'm going to ask you just two quick questions before I go on to the reader questions. How far in advance do you tape Ready Room? Are you able to disclose that?
It varies. Sometimes it's a couple of weeks. Sometimes it's sometimes it's up to a month. Because of the Omicron garbage we're experiencing right now. We've had to shut down 2 times for like long times because someone on the crew has tested positive, which means that everything is pushed around in real weird, messed up ways. So we've taped some stuff for Picard like a little over a month ago. Before it premiered.
No spoilers.
I won't spoil anything. I get to watch all of these shows twice. I get to watch them.
I hate you.
I get to watch them months before they're actually finished. Wow. So I see them with temporary graphics and temporary dialogue, and sometimes.
Yeah, but you're a pro, so you're familiar with that stuff.
There's these great shots that they do, like outside the bridge of Discovery, where they're gonna mat in all the spaceship with just like the view screen, but like. Here's the entire set, the backside, all the wood. There's one thing, there's this very intense scene happening inside Shepard Book's ship. And then just outside of his ship is like some crew person sitting on an Apple box looking at their phone. there's this incredibly tense drama happening like 6 feet away from this guy, and he's just sitting there like scrolling through Twitter or whatever. It's really funny.
Acting, yes, I know. So the other
really
question is,
just as a fan, you know, one of the things I do with Ready Room is that I get to bring my experience as a veteran of Star Trek and my lifelong experience as a fan of Star Trek into the same job, and I'm trying to like interpret current Star Trek through my experience to give it context.
Yes.
But I'm also trying to bring my fellow Trekkies into the room where it happens, and I'm like, well, this is the stuff I want to know as a fan. Presumably, it's the same stuff you want to know as a fan. Oh wait, I remember it being this way when I did it. Is it still like this? Like, so it brings and like I feel like that's kind of what makes me a unique host of Ready Room as opposed to somebody else.
You mean After Trek? After Trek. No, we won't talk about After Trek. I'm sorry.
So, you know, it's just I don't know. I'm really grateful for it, and
you do a great job.
And I don't want to take any of it for granted at all.
I hear you. No, you're the perfect host.
I get afraid that like if I talk about it too much, somehow like they're gonna find out, and then they'll be like, "Wait, he loves this, yoink!" Like it's silly, but I'm sure you can relate.
No, I can, but here's the thing. One of the things that makes me, I think, a good writer about trans stuff is I am trans. So what makes you a great host of a Star Trek show is you're a Star Trek fan as well as a former actor on Star Trek Next Generation. I've seen you on David Gerrold's page, which I am so blessed to have been accepted as one of his friends. But I also see you in the center seat and in a lot of other little documentary things. How much of that is, well, Wil Wheaton needs to make some money, and Wil Wheaton has to have a job, and his agent is going to get him some work, and how much of it is you're just like part of the family and you always will be?
I believe that it's part of the family. That's how it feels to me. If it were not that, it would actually be kind of hurtful, because when I was growing up, it was about the money and it wasn't about being part of the family.
I think of Galaxy Quest, and I think of the actors going to the opening of a store and having to cut the ribbon, you know?
So the thing is, like, listen, that's a reality for those of us that work in genre television, you know? And there have been moments in my career where I had to do like, by Grabthar's hammer, what a savings. And like, that was rough. At the time, it was humiliating. Looking back on it, I'm very grateful that opportunity presented itself to me so that like I could get on to the next thing. Ready Room's my job. It is how I make my living these days. I also make my living as a writer, but primarily I am making my living as the host of Ready Room. That's like my everyday job, and everyone on my team knows that in my complicated and overfull schedule, Ready Room gets #1 priority all the time. Like it's in the top. When Ready Room conflicts with something, the other thing gets out of the way. But at the same time, it is very much that I love it and I'm part of the family. And like, I want to be for the new, younger Star Trek cast members, not just the 20-year-olds, but like the 30-year-olds who are part of the current new Star Trek. I want them to feel that they are as much a part of the entire legacy of the world as we are. And I kind of want to bring to them what not all of the original cast members brought to us. Some of the original cast members brought to us like open arms and listen, this can be a weird world to navigate. If you ever want to talk to somebody about it, like, you know, I'm here for you. George and Walter were like that. David Gerrold was like that for me as well. So was Melinda Snodgrass. I'm trying real hard to be that for other people. Now I'm on David's page on Facebook just because I like it. And I respect him. We disagree on some things.
Oh yeah, me too. But he's so funny.
In a really wonderful, we can disagree and be friends way, and it's totally cool. And you know, like I'm on Next Generation because of David. Like David.
I didn't know that.
It is so it's a longer story, and I'll give you the incredibly short version.
Okay. I know he wrote the Bible. I know that much. Or
When Next
co-wrote.
Generation, yeah, he did. When Next Generation was being developed, Gene really wanted a teenage character to bring kids in. And David said, I think it's a really bad idea. Teenage characters tend to become like Will Robinson or Cousin Oliver. It doesn't work. If you're going to do this, you need an actor who's going to bring this like kind of pathos to this character that makes him not gee whiz. And I just saw this kid in Stand By Me, and I think that he would be really good for this role.
And he didn't know you at the time. He just was a fan.
He didn't know me at all. He didn't know me at all. And there's a thing that's really interesting is that I and Gordy from Stand By Me and Wesley from Star Trek The Next Generation, all three of us don't have dads.
Wow.
And yeah, and I don't think it is a coincidence that the two most iconic roles of my life before Big Bang Theory, where I'm basically playing myself, so I guess all three of the most iconic, well-known roles of my life are young men who had no fathers. That's the experience that I bring to everything. And Bob Justman said, and I've seen the memos, David gave me copies of the memos, I have them. Bob Justman wrote back to the memo and said, this kid is a terrific actor, and he has a legion of teeny bopper fans that are potential Star Trek audience. That's how I got on the show. And David went to bat for me. Bob Justman went to bat for me. And I will, like in an indirect way, in a weird butterfly effect way, I met my wife because I worked on Star Trek.
I didn't know that. I did not know that.
So it's all indirect. I was on a Star Trek cruise when I was 18. And I met my friend Stephanie on that cruise. Part of the ship was Star Trek fans. Part of the ship was Muggles. And my friend Stephanie was on the cruise with her parents as a high school graduation present. And I met her, and she was a Muggle, and we immediately hit it off. We were both big LA Kings fans. We both liked the same music. Stephanie's 3 weeks older than me. We were like instantly friends. And 5 years later, Stephanie was having a party that I didn't want to go to, that she invited me to, and she invited a friend from work who also didn't want to go. Stephanie never would have imagined introducing to each other because they seemed like such different people. And that woman was Anne.
Oh my God.
Had I not been on that cruise, had I not met Stephanie, I never would have met Anne.
And you never would have been on the cruise if it wasn't for Star Trek.
I never would have been on that cruise. Had it not been for David Gerald, I never would have been on Star Trek. I mean, it just keeps going back and back and back and back and back. I asked David if I was like, I won't be on your page because I want to interact with you. If you ever see me in public doing stuff that's like being Star Trek fan stuff, that's just me being a Star Trek fan. Like, I'm not going to, somebody today said on my Facebook page, somebody was like, celebrities do all this shit and you don't do that. And I was like, well, first of all, I'm not a celebrity, man. Like a celebrity is a thing. A celebrity is an industry. A celebrity is a product with a giant team of people around them. And they just don't live in our world. I'm a dude with a high profile job at a moment in time when it's real easy for me to talk to a lot of people all at once.
And you talk to celebrities as part of your job. So that's pretty cool. All right,
I mean,
speaking of fans.
That's what I'm going to start saying that. I'm not a celebrity. Celebrities are the people I interview. Thank you.
Exactly. You're welcome. You're welcome. Hey, I'm a writer. So I'm going to start with.
I really do think that it just kind of comes down to like, what's your self? Do you think you're really fucking great and everybody should exist to serve you? I really
You've met Caitlyn Jenner then. Okay. So the first fan question is going to come from my BFF. So Maya is also a trans woman. She's the reason I'm alive. I was going to end my life and she got me to not do that. So she's a big fan, and she starts with a fanish kind of question. Since you're a traveler in the Next Generation and space and time mean nothing, would you be willing to make an appearance on Discovery? She 100%. Says she'd love for Star Trek to fix the legacy of Wesley Crusher. They did him dirty. So first part, would you be on Discovery?
I would.
second. Do you think that your legacy, the Wesley Crusher legacy, was done dirty? I don't agree, but
I really don't. The reason I don't is I've asked Ron Moore, who wrote Wesley, off the show. And Ron said if Wesley had stayed on the show, he was leaving Starfleet. There is no way Wesley Crusher was going to be a person who followed the rules all the time and was a cog in the machine. That's just not who he was. He wanted to do something more with himself. And he saw this opportunity to, like, in a very science fiction way, kind of show this extreme version of like going your own way, following your own path, identifying your own journey and experiencing it. And I really love that. Selfishly, just as a person who loves the cast of Next Generation, I wish I had been around for more, just because I think it's been really good to be around them more than I was. But, you know, everything happens for a reason.
Sure. And I saw in the center seat about how they screwed over your audition or the movie role you were supposed to be in, and that just sucks, you know. So, all right.
That was a giant bummer, but look, it's non-canonical. Like, it's because Wesley, you know, Wesley's sort of like kind of at that wedding. The scene was cut. You can find that on YouTube, but it's not in canon. That is, it's extracurricular. It's as canonical as the fan fiction I've written myself, which I actually think is more canonical than that scene in that movie. So, yes, I did happen to bring up at Star Trek Day when I saw Akiva. I was like, you know, I just wanted to mention to you that Wesley Crusher is a traveler of all of space and time.
Yes.
And the last time I checked, the various Star Trek series existed at various points in space and time. So I am at your service if you are interested. And Akiva just sort of thoughtfully, quietly, knowingly nodded, accepted that I had laid that on the table, and it was not discussed further.
Yep. When I met him at the Paley Center, I swear to God, has to be the first time I've ever met the guy. He's doing the line at the red carpet, and he says, "Dawn Ennis!" And I'm thinking, what the fuck? How does he know me? And he still has never told me the story of how he knows me. But I love this man. So let me go to the fan questions on Facebook. I'm going to try and shoot through them because I've got to Zoom at 6:30 and you've got to get going. Okay. If they were to bring Wesley back, which show would you like it to be? Would it be Picard, Lower Decks, Prodigy? Would you be even interested in reprising Wesley?
I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. Yeah, I'm sure you can imagine. Prodigy would be amazing because, for this reason. Prodigy is the way kids are coming to Star Trek. Wesley is the way kids came to Next Generation. The closing of that circle would be beautiful and so meaningful to me. So that's one. Lower Decks is probably my favorite Star Trek of all time. The idea of Wesley returning as a traveler and going back and forth between the bridge and the lower decks as someone who has existed in both places, and Boimler being like, "You're Wesley fucking Crusher, oh my God," and Mariner being like, "Oh yeah, whatever, you know what, my mom's the captain and I didn't do anything about it," right? Like, it would be hilarious. So I would love that. All of that said, the cast on Picard are my family. If I had the opportunity to work with my family again, if I had the opportunity to be on the bridge of a starship with any of them, it would be a challenge. I would weep most of the day. It would be difficult. So the answer to that question is a very broad, absolute yes. You know, a business person would tell me to play it coy and say, I hope we can make a deal. But the reality is I love Star Trek so much. And I know that Star Trek loves me back. That if the opportunity were to arise, I know that we would all work real hard to make it happen.
People want to know if you'd want to be a captain, an admiral, possibly a propulsion expert for Daystrom Institute, maybe working with the Q, exploring space. and a lot of people want to know about something else that I'll get to next. So do you think there's a rank that would fit you, fit your character?
I don't think Wesley would choose to serve in Starfleet. I think as a traveler, he has experienced things in the world, in the universe, in existence, that kind of puts Starfleet as an organization into a context that only he and the other travelers can see. And in that, I think he would prefer to remain outside of the organization. I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. I've written fan fiction about this I will not ever publish. Wesley's thing with the travelers is we got to keep the universe in order, right? And I just kind of stole that from Doctor Who. There are these moments that are fixed, and we have to make sure that those moments don't get fucked up. So we keep an eye on them, and every now and then things start to go a little sideways, and we have to figure out, do we let them go sideways or do we nudge them? And then he makes those sorts of things. With all of that responsibility and all that, he's kind of like Dr. Manhattan, where he exists in every,
that's right,
in every space and time, all at the same time. It's all happening all at once. He's also kind of like a Time Lord, where it's all kind of happening all at once, and he can kind of go anywhere. And because he exists outside of space and time, things that are risky are more of like a challenge than a threat.
And they could de-age you like they did with Mark Hamill in Mandalorian. They could make you young Wesley again.
Yeah. So there's just like, there are so many opportunities and so many things. I have so many ideas. But I think the thing is, like, the thing that's cool is that my ideas, they're the same ideas as every other fan. Like, it's just like, yeah, if you were a fan, you could do whatever you wanted. What would it be? The only thing that I would add that I think is really specific to me, tons of scenes with gays.
Oh, yeah.
Like maybe 17 episodes that are just a two-hander of Wesley and Dr. Crusher.
Man. So tell me, last time we saw Wesley was at the wedding in a Starfleet uniform. So you say you don't think he'd be in Starfleet, but that's the last place we saw him. And I know, because fans talked about it, and I think I've even seen it, there was more scenes shot than were shown in Nemesis.
There's a scene where Wesley,
there's a girl, you see a girl or something, right?
Yeah, the scene where Wesley is talking to his mom, and Picard comes up, and Picard's like, Wesley, it's awesome to see you. You're serving on the Titan, I guess? And Wesley's like, yeah, it's going to be great. I really want to go get some of that over there.
Exactly. Chasing tail.
I really want to see if I can go there and sniff her butt a little bit. And Wesley's entire attitude through all of it it's really charming and funny, right? He's like, you guys are great, but you're like super cock blocking me. I got to go. Okay. It's adorable. In my headcanon, I justify this with the following conceit.
Okay.
Wesley is a traveler. This is a fixed moment in time, the marriage of Riker and Troy. It is, he knows Data's going to die. He knows this is the last time they're all going to be together. So he goes there and he presents himself in a form and in a style that they expect, that fits with that lets them feel comfortable, that gives them what they expect, so that the moment can be what the moment is supposed to be. And that is why he shows up like that. And that's why all of those things kind of went down. It's awesome. It's one of the infinite branching timelines that he chooses to exist in temporarily in that form. All of it's non-canonical, but like, I mean, who's going to argue with me about it?
So what's your...
If you really want to argue with me about it, fine. I don't want to fight about it, but that's just what I thought.
What's your favorite Depeche Mode song? You were at the big Pasadena Rose Bowl concert in 1988.
I was. That is such a tough call. It's been a different song at different moments in my life. Where my head immediately goes right away, and that's just what I'm going to say that I think is true, is probably But Not Tonight from the Black Celebration album. The last song on the Black Celebration album. That was one of my absolute favorites. But honestly, their entire catalog, from like A Broken Frame all the way up to Violator, there's not a song in that group that I don't absolutely love. I tried so hard to share my love of Depeche Mode with the adults on Trek that I thought were cool. Frakes and I tried to trade. He tried to show me jazz, and I tried to show him Depeche Mode, and it didn't work. Eventually, I got jazz. To the best of my knowledge, Frakes never really found an affinity for Depeche Mode.
Do you think Wesley Crusher was well written? If you could change something about his early story or character arc, what would it be?
There were moments where he was well written. Melinda Snodgrass, Sandy Fries, Ron Moore, Brandon Braga all wrote Wesley very well. In the early seasons, Wesley was an idea more often than he was a three-dimensional person and a character. And in those eras, I think he's actually written quite poorly. When he was written by better writers who saw him as a person instead of an idea, he was more interesting. If I could change anything, I would change two things. Give him a lot more scenes with Dr. Crusher. Wesley's brilliant. He is a genius. He sees things in ways that most people can't. There's just something incredibly special about him. The woman who raised him has got to be pretty fucking remarkable. Like, holy shit, she has got to be, she's the chief medical officer of the flagship of Starfleet. And she's his mom. And he never goes to her for advice? What? Like, she's a single mom. Of course they're close. They're buddies. They do shit together. Like, he loves and respects her and like wants her counsel. They never did that. It killed Gates and me. I would change that. The other thing I would change is that I would write scenes for Wesley, particularly in the first 3 seasons, where we see him struggling to be a kid trying to fit in around it all.
Hello.
One of the reasons I love Adira as much as I do is that they are the realization of the promise of Wesley Crusher. Yeah. They absolutely deserve to be there. They are respected by their peers. They are a valuable member of the crew. The captain will say, hey, do this and report back. And Adira's like, I'm on it. And Adira comes back and says, oh my God, I know this isn't what you want to hear, but this is what I found. And the captain's like, fuck, that's not what I want to hear, but all right, here we go. In that same situation with Wesley, Wesley came back, was like, I know you don't want to hear this. And they were like, hey, shut up, kid. Like, and
not now, Wesley, not now.
Yeah, like, right. So that's the big change I would make. I, as a child, really struggled to have a social relationship with my coworkers. I had a great work relationship with my coworkers, but I didn't have the social relationship with them, and I missed it. And I wasn't around other kids all the time. Like, I was always around adults. So was Wesley, and I wish that they had done that for him.
All right, speed round here. What was it like on Big Bang Theory, both revered and hated?
I loved every second of it. I adored the cast. I loved the writers. I loved every second I was on that stage was great. It took me 10 years to feel comfortable and feel like I deserved it. I was convinced I was going to be fired every single time. I was convinced that this would be my last episode. But I absolutely loved it, and I'm super grateful for it. I also got to contribute to Wil Wheaton's storyline significantly. The writers asked me about my own real life experiences and incorporated those into the character in ways that were tremendously healing and therapeutic for me.
Where can I get a Wesley sweater? And I guess I should ask if you have any Wesley sweaters.
If you know where to get a Wesley sweater, please let me know. I just found out that Wesley's acting ensign uniform with the do I have it? I don't have it. I have a hoodie that's Wesley's 3-colored sweater.
The stripe. The stripe. One. Yeah.
That was sold at auction in 2006. Sold for $2,800.
Wow.
In 2006, I couldn't afford to spend $2,800 on anything. I could afford that now, and I really wish I had it. I really, really do. I really wish I owned that. One time at New York Comic Con, around 8 or 9 years ago, someone who had purchased one of Wesley's sweaters from Encounter at Farpoint, brought it to the convention to show to me.
Oh, the orange one, maybe?
Yeah. I put it on.
Oh, you did?
Well, it's a stretchy sweater, so it fit.
Yeah, sure.
And there is actually a photograph, I posted it on my blog, of me doing like a "this is me then, this is me now" kind of.
What's your favorite episode of the host of the Ready Room? Either because it was the most fun or the most impactful.
That is very much like asking me which of my children I love the most. I'm trying to think if there was an episode that was particularly surprising. So there's an episode with Mary Weissman, where I think I really overstepped my role as a host and told her a thing that I would tell her if I were a fan at a convention, about Tilly feeling seen and how I felt seen, and about Tilly being placed on a path that wasn't hers and how she felt she had to be there and how much I related to it. And when all of it was over, the crew was like, "Oh my God, that was amazing. I can't believe you did that." And I went to the producers and I was like, in retrospect, I feel like I should have run this past you. And I feel like it was sandbagging Mary and it wasn't okay. And we need to give everybody, PR, Mary, whoever is in charge of approving this, everybody gets an opportunity to say that gets cut because it wasn't approved. And at every step of the way, everyone said, you know, this actually feels like a thing that feels really good and feels like fans are going to relate to it. And you really kind of captured part of the central message of Star Trek in this thing. We're going to leave it in. And I was like, okay, scared to death. And the reaction from the audience was the reaction from the crew. And I was really relieved. And I'm really proud of that episode.
I have two fans that are going to make your day. First of all, when I interviewed Mary, she came out as queer in my interview.
Oh, wow.
I've never cried during an interview, and we were both in tears, talking about how people talked about her size, talking about her love for her lovely husband, who had at that point was still on the show. Elizaveta, he seems to have, these are direct questions, these are comments, and I'm going to ask one last question. He seems to have really taken charge as the lead Trekkie in the Ready Room. He communicates authentically as a fan. He laughs with us, for us, and cries with us and for us. His interview with Mary really helps me understand him better and how he is watching Discovery and what he's taking from it. It's also how and why I watch. It's literally my weekly therapy session. After 2016, I really don't know where I'd be without these characters, and will always approaches these actors and writers as if it were me myself saying thank you. And Stevie adds, on a serious note, I love him on the Ready Room. He has such a rapport and genuine love of all things Trek. He's so endearing to watch him interview the cast and crew. His interview with Tilly, aka Mary Wiseman, was so lovely, and I got really emotional watching that exchange.
I'm really grateful to know that, and I feel really, I just feel really good about that. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm going to ask you the last question, then let you go. Robin Stewart wants to know, what has Star Trek not done yet that it should try? Where should it boldly go next?
What an amazing question. What that commenter said about 2016, like, hooked into me really strongly. I feel like since 2016, we have been living in a terrible trauma. We've been living through extraordinarily traumatic times. All of us. It hits some of us harder and more painfully than it hits others, but all of us are in a trauma. We thought it was going to be over a year ago, and it's not. It's ongoing, and there's no end in sight. I imagine this is very much how people felt maybe in 1967, maybe in 1968. It seemed like the Vietnam War would never end. It seemed like the progress that had been made on civil rights was just being immediately rolled back and thrown away. And in 1967, 1968, the world needed Star Trek. The world needed Star Trek to say, this is all temporary. All of this garbage is a choice. We can choose to be better. We can choose to be different. Here's how. And that inspired a lot of people. A lot of people went, yeah, we can do that. I think the world needs Star Trek again.
Yeah.
think
And we're
at
getting
a-
it.
I
And we're
think
getting it.
well, so the thing is, we're in a moment now where like dystopian science fiction feels like, it doesn't feel like a warning, it feels like a documentary, and it's not entertaining. And the hopefulness of Star Trek, the symbolism of the DMA in this season of Discovery and how it represents, I don't know, what does it represent? Does it represent fascism? Does it represent the pandemic? Does it represent Trumpism? Does it represent all of those things? Like, it can represent, right? I mean, that's when Star Trek is at its best.
Mm-hmm.
I guess if we can credit Star Trek with helping pave the way or helping to clear the brambles of ignorance off the path to allow equality to advance, if the original Star Trek did that, maybe Star Trek now, maybe the thing that Star Trek needs to really look at is like how we're setting our planet on fire and no one seems to care. Isn't that weird to you? That
It's
like
very...
we're literally setting the planet on fire. It's burning down. They're telling us every year it was hotter than last year. We see
last 9 years. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We see what's happening with weather. We see what's happening with climate, but because it's inconvenient to capitalism, we're just pretending that it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
I think we need something that puts right in front of people the stark reality of the stakes that we are facing and what we can do. Like in the 60s, Star Trek was like, hey audience, here's a choice. And I would like Star Trek now to do the same thing. Hey, it's time to make a choice.
I hope it does. Well, I could talk to you all night, but I have this other thing I do. I'm a member of the West Hartford Democrats here in Connecticut. And
that's awesome. Thank you. Thank you for doing that.
I love it. I enjoy politics, and it's my way of fighting, for what's right. So I'm going to go join that Zoom and say goodnight to you.
You have my proxy to go forth and cast a vote in my favor to send Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema into the center of the sun. On behalf
you can arrange it as the traveler, so I'll make it happen.
I certainly can. Dawn, it was amazing.
Thank you, Will.
To talk to you. If you
Great talking to you.
Feel free to reach out at all.
Send me a picture.
I will send you a picture. I'm going to take a picture right now and I'm going to send it to you.